Fred, you want me to start?
Sure.
Okay, so this is the November 10th, 2021 IDA Governance Committee meeting. It is 12:03 p.m. This meeting is being conducted electronically via Zoom in accordance with Part E of Chapter 417 of the laws of 2021, which amended the New York Open Meetings Law to allow for electronic meetings due to COVID-19, and there is a quorum present.
Wonderful.
So we have a couple of things on our governance committee agenda. So we'll just take them in order. You know what, maybe we should take them out of order because I think Bill should probably be here if he's going to be able to join us for the UTEP discussion.
Okay.
So let's go to renewable energy pilots first, because Barry is on, and Barry and I have been working on this for a while now. And I don't want us to get too far down a path and then have you guys say, no, not at all what we were thinking. So what Barry and I have been discussing is that because there were changes through NYSERDA that regulate what an assessor can charge in in taxes on a renewable energy project. And I think, Barry, correct me if I'm mistaken, it's limited right now to solar and wind.
Correct.
Okay, and wind is sort of off on the side for us right now, but we realized that our 300,000 per 9.5 megawatt model that we've been using for all these years is probably not going to work anymore. And so we had to sort of revamp this. And at the same time, we started getting calls from small scale solar projects that same $300,000 per 9.5 megawatts, which works out to about $31,500 roughly. It's an odd number per megawatt. That was making those projects non-starters. So Barry and I have been working together on this, and we've been working with NYSERDA. And what we've come up with is basically that we need 5 different segments, kind of. We need to come up with a pilot plan for battery energy systems, and some of them might end up being the same, but battery energy systems, fuel cells, solar projects that are over 5 megawatts, and then what they call community solar, which is 5 megawatts and under. Is that right, Barry? It includes
Correct.
5? Okay, so
Yeah,
5
megawatts
5. And under. And for those community solar projects, I think we should have 2 segments of those. One for just under 5 megawatts. Hi, Felix. An under 5 megawatt project, and then another one for less desirable land, so that we incentivize these small scale solar installations on like Superfund sites. But I think we should have a whole list of less desirable properties. Maybe it'll be a small acre that's landlocked and there isn't really anything that's gonna go there ever. So we should probably incentivize those further. We, a few months ago, came up with an idea to have 1,000 megawatts per $1,000 per megawatt for our BESS projects, the battery energy storage projects. And in the research that Barry and I have been doing with NYSERDA, it seems like that's not in line with what the rest of the state is doing. So I don't have actual numbers to come to you and present. Barry and I have, even this morning, we had a conference call because we just the other day got some follow-up. I guess NYSERDA didn't include PSE&G, or they didn't have the PSE&G numbers when they put together their most recent round of things. So we were in there trying to make it work, and we realized that there isn't even a calculator for Long Island. They told us what to do to make it work, but that was just even this morning. So what I'm presenting or suggesting is that anyone who's interested in the deep dive on this, feel free to get involved. And Barry and I can get you up to speed if you're so inclined. But if not, basically that Barry and I come up with sort of like 4 segments: community solar with the 2 pieces of it, fuel cell pilots, over 5 megawatt solar, and BESS systems. I know that was a lot. What do you guys think?
Barry, question as it relates to NYSERDA, can they really force the assessor to establish these values?
So is part of the governor's latest budget that was adopted in April, they changed the assessment methodology for solar and wind projects. So now it's part of the real property tax law that a discounted cash flow model has to be used to set the assessment for solar and wind projects over 1 megawatt. So it's no longer, Fred, NYSERDA's recommendation. It is now changed into a real property tax law that will go into effect next year. So it will be required going forward for all of these properties above 1 megawatt.
So it's effective January 1st of 2022?
Correct.
And when you say discounted cash flow, then does everything fit into the grid, or is each project, we have to ask for a discounted cash flow and go accordingly?
So certain information, the model has been released officially, but certain information will be required to utilize the model that the assessor will have to ask for from each developer, project specific basis.
So we'll need to ask that as part of the application?
Yes, I mean, we could ask for it just so we could see the ceiling, but that discounted cash flow method would be what they would pay as of right without an IDA pilot. So that would be separate.
Okay.
So that would be without, any benefits. That's what they would pay.
What I'm suggesting is that sorry, Frank, we get a couple of examples together and maybe come up with a set. It might not work for all 4 of them. Maybe some of them we're going to have to get project specific numbers. But if we can get a plan like we had with for solar previously and just say, it's $10,000 per, and I'm making up numbers, but $10,000 per megawatt if you're going to do an over 5 megawatt solar installation. And if it's under, then it's $3,000. But if it's in a less desirable piece of property, then it's $2,000 per megawatt. I'm hoping that we can come up with something so that it's a set dollar amount, so we're not doing case by case on every single one. Although if we have to, we will. And then yes, Fred, we would have to get more information from these projects.
I know time is short, and November, rest of November, December are going to be busy. But are we hoping to have this in place by January 1st or shortly thereafter?
Well, I'm wondering if this is the type of information that should be incorporated into our UTEP or if this should be something separate. And I defer to councils on that.
So I think, and this is just Barry speaking first, I'll go first. I think part of that on the UTEP, I mean, you could provide for these types of projects and, then say that it will be done. I don't think you have to put the specific values into your UTEP is what I'm saying. And then, you could have a policy that you could amend from time to time that could have the values if you wanted it to be sort of public for a period of time. That may work, but I'll defer to Bill and Howard.
The UTEP, again, I apologize, I don't have it in front of me with the Zoom screen, but I think we have enough flexibility in how we do the pilots. Right now, I'm not sure it needs to be amended, but I'll take a look at that because that could be something, and then when the prevailing wage goes into effect, we're probably gonna have to change the UTEP anyway, so.
Yes. Frank, you were going to ask a question?
Could you explain discounted cash flow? I know it's a basic, but I don't know what you're talking about.
Hold, Barry, let me just jump in here for a second. And Barry can certainly explain it, but I don't think we need to understand it. That's what the assessor uses to determine what your assessment is, or it's one of the tools that they can
Gotcha.
use.
Okay.
I'll call you back later on Zoom.
And how do other IDAs deal with this issue? Or that's so new that nobody's really dealt with it?
And so other IDAs in New York have prepared like a fixed number per megawatt for
Like we did.
certain sizes of projects. Some have a sliding scale based on size, and others have, some have provided for what Lisa is recommending, where there's an incentive to use less desirable land, and or a penalty if you're using like prime farmland, which is obviously more abundant upstate New York. And so those have been, different approaches that IDAs have taken. But I think the ones that have been successful in sort of in having the economic activity related to these projects have been ones that have been flexible and not put them to the hard numbers directly into the UTEP, because the industry is evolving very quickly on these points. And so what numbers you use, this year may be different. So going back to 2017, the pilot numbers were higher because the state incentives were higher, but those have now burned off. And so the state incentives have burned off, and we're now waiting to see what happens with the federal benefits for the tax credits. And so all of those things could have a dramatic effect on sort of each one of these projects. And so I think having a guideline number is the best way forward, to sort of give some certainty to these projects, but also know that it needs to be flexible on a case by case basis.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Lisa and Bill, I have the UTEP in front of me, the section on electrical power generating facilities, storage facilities, blah, 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 blah. And it looks like we have immense flexibility. Those projects are termed 10 to 25 years, following blah, blah, blah. With fixed pilot payments determined by the agency in its sole discretion and subject to periodic escalation, and determining the blah, blah, the agency may consider the total amount of power generated, stored, or transmitted, and the assessed value of such project. And I suppose if we really wanted to make it open another door, we could add to that, and such other factors as it may deem relevant or something like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Again, my recollection, we left it very wide open to how we were doing it.
Yep.
I apologize for signing on a couple of minutes late, but what are we trying to accomplish?
So, Felix, what I'm asking is that we come up with pilot thresholds, I guess, for basically right now we have 4 different types of renewable energy projects. That might change tomorrow. They might come up with the who's it, what's it, something we've never heard of, and we're going to have to come up with that is a technical term, everyone. We'll have to come up with a pilot for something else. But right now we have community solar, which is 5 megawatts, under 5 megawatts. Regular old solar, which is over 5 megawatts, battery energy storage systems, and fuel cells. So what I'm asking is that we come up with a plan of how we're going to handle those 4 types of renewable energy projects, because the pilots that we have been using, the law is changing. What the numbers we have are no longer in line with the law. We have to adjust.
Right, but I think what everybody's saying is our UTEP is so open-ended right now. Are you just looking for guidance, or do you want to change the open-ended?
No, I'm good with leaving the UTEP alone as far as renewable energy is concerned. I just want to make sure that I'm not out in left field doing this and everybody goes, no, we don't want it. This isn't what we want to do. I just want to make sure that everybody knows the path that I'm going down.
No, and we also have to be careful because of sunrise wind too. So we don't want to put anything in here that's gonna upset that.
Yeah, but the sunrise wind is different because that's the power, only the power line. It's really coming up in connection with a couple of new applications, and we wanted to make sure that we're not under basically assessing the projects for purposes of our pilot. And, we had one group.
You
going,
think
"Well,
we're
this was
under
the-"
assessing them? I
Well,
think
there
the
was,
state thinks we're over assessing them, no?
well, that's what
Over.
we wanted. I mean, we had one where they came in and said, "Oh, this is, we want to pay, X dollars per kilowatt. That's what everybody else was paying." And we're saying, well, we need to review it. So we want to make sure we're not our pilots are either not too high or too low. And for some of the smaller projects, they may be too high. And for some of the larger ones, they may be too low. So that was really the genesis of this, that Lisa really needs, with input from Barry and I and the state, a little more guidance. But, where we had one size fits all for everybody may not be the best way to do it.
It's not working anymore.
Yeah, and that was the genesis of it.
With the change in the law
And
that's,
that has nothing to do with the ones that are on town-owned property, which are totally unique. But if somebody, somebody's coming in and doing fuel cells, solar, battery storage, whatever, Lisa needs a little more structure in it. So when she's talking to applicants, she's either not charging them too much or giving away the store.
Bill, with the change in the law that's coming in January, did the state offer any recommendations or suggestions on how to handle it? Handle
Barry, you want
the,
to answer that one?
Yeah, so the short answer, Felix, is no. NYSERDA has an RFP out to hire consultants to, update models and do all of these sorts of things, but they haven't filled that RFP or done anything yet in regards to that. So I think a lot of what we've been doing lately, Lisa and I have been working with NYSERDA to, get some of the technical expertise that we need to sort of evaluate some of these project requests. And they do plan to come out with guidance allegedly, but there are large gaps in the guidance that they've produced currently. So as Lisa mentioned, the solar calculator that they have out there that they point us to use doesn't include the region of Long Island.
that's wonderful. With the,
God bless us.
with the proposed RFP that's out there, are we able to function as we are right now, since we have an open-ended UTAP language, and wait for their recommendation before we make any permanent changes?
To the UTEP, yes, I think you could function under your existing UTEP and still allow us to sort of deal with each of these project segments on their own. I don't think that would be an issue. And if the state comes out with more guidance, obviously we would be very quick to review that and share it with Lisa and make sure it's consistent with any findings that we make for each of the categories.
And are you running into any difficulty operating that way right now, the way that you're operating now? Are you running into any difficulties or obstacles?
Yes. So Barry, we right now have, we have a couple of community solar applications that want to go onto sites that I don't have a pilot that makes any sense. If I tell them,
Well, but Lisa, your UTEP allows you not to just follow that pilot we're talking about.
I
You know
know,
what I'm saying?
But
So,
Lisa
I
needs
think
guidance on how.
You
That
need,
is
I
it.
understand you need guidance, but I think the board needs us to say, okay, we have these two projects, this is what would make sense. And we should treat them the same. If we have two community solar projects, they should be treated the same, obviously.
and that's.
And- Right.
That's what Barry and I have been working on, is to come up with some
Right.
numbers that we can present to the board. We're not at the point to present those numbers. We're getting close, I think. But I
Okay.
just figured, since we were having governance, I would let everybody know what we were thinking about doing and what we're working on, so that I don't get too far down and come up with a number and have everybody say, no, that's not the direction we wanted you to go in. So this is mostly, I don't expect us to leave this with a hard and fast or 4 or 5 answers and numbers. I just want to make sure that everybody understands what we're up against and what we're working on. And I want to make sure that we have robust numbers. So when I go to those 2 community solar projects, I don't tell them, it's 3,000 per megawatt, and then in 6 months go, that number made no sense, we got to redo this. So we're trying to get some good information to give them. And it's not just community, don't misunderstand me. It's battery energy, it's the it's fuel cells, it's regular old solar.
What happens to the ones that we already have granted our benefits to that are out there existing? Are they going to be
Grandfathered.
grandfathered in?
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions on that? Is everybody good with this approach?
Yes. Makes great sense.
Just for clarification, the approach is that we're going to continue to operate the way that we're operating until we hear from the state what their recommendations are? Or are you proposing something different than that?
I think we need to come up with some numbers. The state's program is a cap, it's a ceiling. We're not gonna, we have to make sure that we're below that ceiling, but we should come up with, obviously we have to be below that ceiling, because if we're above the ceiling, then we're not an incentive. And also if we're above that ceiling, it's against the law anyway. But I want us to come up with numbers that actually incentivize these projects. I don't think we really can wait. The projects have been patient, but we need to come up with something, even if, because if we wait for the state, it might be next year before they get this stuff together.
And that's
Like,
what you
well into next year.
and that's what you and Brian are working on now, the numbers, and you'll present them to us at a later date.
Yes.
Okay.
Barry,
I
do you disagree?
Wasn't clear on what we were doing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the plan is to develop numbers for each one of these distinct sort of segments now, based on the best information we have compared against the state's assessment model. And then, present them to the governance committee.
And that will be in the form of a policy that associates numbers with these different categories of energy systems, recognizing that we may have to change them down the road.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the best approach.
A policy is a lot easier to change than the UTEP.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, this market's still evolving, and so it may have to be revisited annually.
Sure.
Are you looking for a resolution on this, or are you looking just for a consensus?
Just consensus.
So, what, for me, for one, I'm okay with what you just outlined.
Keep doing what you're doing, Lisa and Barry.
I'll ask the question. Does anybody would prefer that we go in a different direction? No. Okay, we're good then, please.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. And we will come back with more information. This is an evolving reality, and it's cool and interesting, but it keeps changing on us. Okay, so now that Bill is on the call, I'm gonna flip back into our UTEP. There were a couple of items in our UTEP that I think need attention. I think need us to consider. And if anyone has the UTEP in front of them, it's basically in the pilot on page 10, the pilot agreement section, which is D 1A. And basically what it says is that industrial manufacturing, or exactly what it says, is industrial manufacturing, research and development, commercial warehouse distribution facilities, retail, subject to retail restrictions in the Act, and corporate office facilities are all eligible for standard exemption. It goes on to say speculative office projects may be eligible for the standard exemption if they are projected to provide economic benefits in terms of jobs, involve significant capital investment in the town, repurpose existing vacant or nearly vacant buildings, or will stimulate the local economy. So it continues on, but we spent, the last time we redid our UTEP, which was in 2020, we spent a lot of time thinking about and honing our housing, the housing portion of our UTEP, and I think we got it to a pretty good place. I have a couple of things I want to ask you about in that, but we left this sort of industrial warehousing section of it, just very broad. And I think for the most part, that's probably good, except for that we find ourselves in a situation where we have a whole bunch of speculative warehouse distribution facilities coming in. So that's one thing that I want to mention. And then we also have had a decent amount of retail rec facilities. So I'm wondering if we should consider maybe giving different benefits for warehouse facilities, warehouse distribution facilities, if and when they create jobs over a certain threshold, or just in general, maybe we should, warehousing should be looked at a little bit different. And then also the retail and rec facilities, I think maybe should have maybe like a little bit of a different approach to them. Bill, do you want to add to that? I don't think you're muted, Bill, but I can't hear you. Nope.
Not yet.
I think we can hear you now.
There was a period when, and again, we're back with Tony Olof was here. We were doing warehouses and we were not giving them the standard 10% exemption. We were doing equivalent of like double 45B down to single 45B, depending on the number of jobs. And this kind of got back into the normal exemption again. I'm not sure it was deliberate, but and the issue is some of the warehouse distribution centers have lots of employees and they're really good jobs. Others, you could have a 600,000 or 700,000 square foot building with 10 people working there. And so we were trying a number of years ago to come up with a formula, which was a little more ad hoc under Tony. But if the facility, and he was trying to do it like so many jobs per square foot or something like that, but where a warehouse that had a small number of jobs should not get the full exemption, the way something like Quality King, which has lots of people working there, is a far different, that's also corporate headquarters, it's a much different operation. And it's coming up, some of these large projects that we're looking at, some may have lots of people working there and some may have very few. So just raising, the philosophical question as to whether or not we need to have these type of 100% exemption, standard exemption for 10 years for a warehouse distribution center. No other IDA in the state that I'm aware of does that. And again, I'm not sure, again, and Fred can give you the real history of this. When this policy was adopted probably 50 years ago, it was, Brookhaven was so far east, the Long Island Expressway didn't even go out that far. It only ended at, Route 111 in Smithtown. And so you had to do something to get people to come that far east. I'm not sure even for any project, the standard exemption is necessary anymore because there's not a lot of land to the west of Brookhaven that can be developed.
If I can make one small comment, it seems to me another metric when you're looking at that should also be the level of salaries they're paying.
Correct.
Good point.
I got a question. If the core mission of the IDA is to create jobs and opportunities and good paying jobs in the town of Brookhaven, why would we incentivize a person to put something up on spec? Why wouldn't we wait till they had a user for the warehouse and then come in and apply so we know that the mission that the IDA is set out upon will be accomplished? I wouldn't want to see us give the incentives and have, as Bill just said, a 600,000 square foot warehouse sitting there waiting for somebody to come in and use it.
Well, I mean, when we have done spec buildings, we have held them to a fairly short leash to get them rented up, and we have put in numbers. So, you think about like the one for Suffolk Industrial, again, that was done on a spec basis and has been fairly successful. So they
Felix,
have worked.
at your suggestion.
Yeah, at the board's suggestion that we held them to a short lease. Probably the one that we did spec that didn't work so well was 555, but that's terminated and will not be redone until they have real people coming in. But for some of the warehouse distribution centers, companies won't sign the lease, the subleases, if the building's not ready to move in, because a lot of those companies say, hey, I need this space now. I'm not looking 2 years from now. So I think for some of that space, doing on a spec works, but we have to keep the developers on a short leash.
And Lisa, as the political people say, I've evolved on that issue.
No, Felix, you said you were uncomfortable with us doing spec. You wanted it to be tightened up a little bit. And we said to the spec projects, we'll incentivize you, but you must have this percentage of the building leased up by this date, or you're not getting the full benefits. And so I hear you saying the same thing that you said when we were meeting in person way back when.
But you see, that just shows you how short span my mind is.
It is a good point.
You're consistent anyway.
Yeah.
That's one thing to be said. I thought you meant, Lisa, that I was endorsing putting them up on spec.
No.
I wasn't.
No, and we heard you say, I want a shorter leash, and we tightened it up. So, and
Good.
it's been effective, I think.
There are a number of IDAs that have done spec buildings. I think of in Deer Park where ADP, most of those buildings were originally put up by spec. The big ones that we're kind of looking at now, whether it be AVR or North Point. North Point's probably going to be, a significant rail customer, which to me means you're taking a lot of trucks off the roads, just like BRT did with the distribution center for Home Depot. So to me, there are other considerations other than just jobs and investment, which are main ones. And also as it relates to North Point or whoever else goes in there, there's no information about this, although Annette might smile. I got to believe somewhere along the line, one of these organizations is going to be our solution to the garbage off Long Island.
Mm.
I don't know how you do that, look at that or discount that up front, but it's important.
And since we brought up that one particular project, I will let you know that although we haven't had the public hearing, it's scheduled for next week. I've been working on a pilot for them, and it's an unusual project, so it doesn't really fit into our typical schedule. But what I did was I gave them years of land only, and then I ramped it up following the 485B formula. So 10%, so they're headed towards full assessed value in 10% increments. So that, although it's not exactly, our UTEP gives me a lot of flexibility. I felt like for this particular project, it made sense to move them along that way. But I will also say, as far as jobs are concerned, Felix, their application, I think they told us 1,100 jobs. They would have 1,100 jobs when all built out, or just shy of 1,100.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And again, we're really doing that one as like a master lease agreement, a master pilot. And as they develop each project, you get divided up among different projects. But so really what Lisa was proposing was almost the equivalent of a double 45B, with phase in for 5 years and then going up 10% a year, plus 2% cap increase over the course of 10 years.
Bill, that'd almost be a commercial industrial version of TriTech in terms of the master.
Yeah, exactly. But well, not quite, because TriTech, we had a very low pilot payment because we did not do a tax increment financing or pilot increment financing. This is more akin to what we did in Suffolk County at Gobretsky Airport, where again, that's been phased in over about 15 years now, as we did that first initial. Master.
Project
Master
like what we're
lease.
talking about, the municipal, solving the garbage problem, as Fred indicated, I would think that there'd be a lot of municipal input in that from various towns. And the likelihood of that being a spec building is pretty remote at that point. So I wouldn't classify that necessarily as a spec building.
Yeah, but that's only one little piece that's 50 acres of the 220 acres on parcel D. And the spec buildings are going to be the two ginormous warehouses on D and probably 3 on B and C. And by the way, we settled that whole case. And
I am very happy personally to hear that. Thank you.
yeah, me too. And North Point paid me back all my attorney's fees and consultant fees of $600,000. And they own B and C and D, and they have an option on A.
Lisa, didn't you say they are the largest or one of the largest
They
holders
told me,
of rental building in the United States?
Yes.
yes, that's what they
Huge.
told me, that they have either more leases or more rental square footage than anybody else in the US. They have some very significant end users, Ford, Chewy, GM, but
They're
that's,
also, they're like, I think, #1 with rail supported warehousing. And you see how, we're shortage of all these truck drivers. So.
and they're one example. We have, ABR has an application into the board for spec warehouse. We're hearing that we're going to be getting a bunch of other applications, whether they come to fruition or not. I don't know. I don't have them yet, but we expect that we're going to get additional applications for spec warehouse distribution centers. So I want to make sure that we have a plan, we're doing it with our eyes open, and that we're consistent. And maybe we don't have to change it in the UTEP. Maybe we can leave it broad the way it is right now. But I just want to make sure that you guys don't think that I'm doing one thing when in fact I'm doing something else. The other piece of that, not just spec, it could be warehouse in general. Maybe it's spec and warehouse. It could be spec for anything. It could be warehousing for anybody. Retail and recreation facilities also. Right now, we give land-only property taxes if it's a recreation center. I don't know if that's appropriate or not. I'm not saying it is or it isn't.
In general, 10 years of land only just doesn't make sense. And, in this day and age, it was needed 30, 40 years ago. I don't think it's needed today. And I'm not sure it's really fair to the town, the school districts, and the county to do that kind of a pilot anymore. Fred, you've been around for the longest on this call. I don't know if you have a different view on that.
No, I do not. No, definitely not. Times have changed, and as you said, not a lot of land around other than what we have.
So, it's in my view, an overly aggressive pilot that's no longer necessary. And I think that section, the so-called standard, what we define as the standard pilot, should probably be changed.
And do you think that should be for all projects? What if somebody who's a core manufacturer or a core industrial project, if they come in?
No, I think the idea of land only for 10 years
Is outdated.
Is absolutely obsolete and should no longer be the policy. That's my recommendation. I don't think it's needed.
I haven't been around quite as long as you two guys have, but a fair amount of time, and I absolutely concur.
Yeah.
So by doing away with land only, Bill, we're saying we're not going to give a project any kind of consideration on their property tax?
No, but so what the standard policy has been, like, if they're paying $100,000 a year in taxes, they're going to pay 100,000 or say 10,000 taxes on the land. They would do that. If you look at even housing, we start at the the land and then ramp up over a certain number of years. Every other agency, takes into effect the value of the new property, and you would do something like, Suffolk County, their standard is a 45B, and that's been forever. It hasn't prevented them. Other agencies do more the equivalent of a double 45B. You phase it in over 10 years. And that's what, I think would be fairer to the taxing jurisdictions and still yet provide the incentive for the the developers to come in and develop. I think giving away 10 years on the new construction, 100% abatement is not needed.
And Bill, correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think Suffolk has a caveat in there that if you have over maybe 50 jobs being created, that they give you an enhancement.
Well, yeah, and they use the equivalent of double 45B. That's their enhancement.
Okay.
Yeah. And then what they hold to, over the years when they've done that, if you don't meet your jobs, they can cut you back down to single 45B.
Bill, that follows.
I was just going to ask Fred, I got to apologize.
ahead.
I don't know what 45B is.
45B is a provision that's been forever in the tax law. But the trouble is municipalities have the option to opt out of it. So every school district in the state has opted out of it. But if you build a commercial or industrial project in New York State, you would get basically a 50% abatement year one, 45 year two going down. So you'd phase out your abatement over 10 years. Virtually a lot of towns and almost every school district in New York State opted out of 45B. But that was the basis for the IDA pilots. They used that. So then we came up with, starting with Suffolk, doing for what they call significant projects. We did a 10-year or what we call double 45B, in that you got, year one, 100% abatement, year two, 90%, then you decline by 10% a year instead of starting at 50%, going down 5% a year. And that's been a pretty standard abatement over the years. And, some agencies have done it by percentage. So Suffolk County still does it on a percentage basis, and others have taken the percentage basis like Brookhaven and Hempstead and quantified it to a dollar amount. Riverhead just approved a couple of pilots where, again, they use that, equivalent of a double 45B, 100% abatement year one, then declining 10% a year over 10 years.
Great. Thank you, Bill. I apologize, Fred. I didn't
No,
mean.
no problem. Sometimes we talk in code and people, we assume everybody knows what we're talking about.
Bill, sometimes does that piggyback off a, say, 3-year land only?
Suffolk, no, does not do, Hempstead does like land only for a couple of years and then phases it in. Suffolk just starts, 100%, 100% abatement year one, 90% year two.
Okay.
Hempstead only does it during the construction period. Once construction is over, then you start paying that.
Once they get the CO, it kicks in?
Yep.
So again, I don't know that we necessarily need to make changes today. And I don't know that we necessarily need to change the UTEP today, especially with prevailing wage coming, that we're going to have to change the UTEP once we figure out what that is. But these are things that I'm a little bit concerned about and are happening now. So I want your input.
Yeah, so maybe what, Howard and I and Barry can work with Lisa and Fred and looking at these issues, the energy issues and the potential impact of prevailing wage. And we'll come back to the board or to the governance committee, then to the full board with some concrete suggestions of where we can make amendments to the UTEP going forward and, probably start kicking in early 2022.
Bill, I'd be a little concerned if we box it in too much with salaries and or square footage.
Yeah,
I just think it pigeonholes us a little bit too much.
And it
Yeah.
also gives us a crazy amount of analysis that we'd have to do every year to figure out what pilot people are getting.
and I would rather, again, you get a large warehouse and there's only going to be 20 workers there. They only get the equivalent of a single 45B. If it's a large warehouse with lots of employees, they get the equivalent of double, and not go back and forth the way we used to, where, I mean, there was a period we had 4 different pilot schedules attached and it was a nightmare.
And any public purpose, such as the garbage issue, could be carved out of that.
Depending on how it's going to work. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if it's just a pure commercial transfer station taking garbage from everybody, you wouldn't necessarily give them the same benefit if it was a transfer station that was entered into a contract with the town, because, and I've done a lot of these solid waste disposal facilities under a municipal contract. And so, for example, like the Covanta plant where you guys send your garbage and they would send you ash, that was built on town-owned land for the benefit of the town of Hempstead originally. But the service agreement between Covanta and the town said, a pass-through cost are real property taxes. So when we financed it through the IDA, we made sure there are no real property taxes, because otherwise the town and their chip fee would be paying taxes to not only themselves, but the county and the school district. So again, if we were to do a transfer station at North Point Winters Brothers for the benefit of the town, it might, and the town had to pay, and that was a pass-through cost, you would make it 100% exempt. If on the other hand, every town from, eastern half of Long Island was sending garbage there on a purely commercial basis, and you might not give them a generous pilot. So it really depends, Fred, on the what they're doing and who's obligated to pay and obligated to pay what.
Okay.
If the commercial haulers are bringing it there, we're not going to give Winter Brothers a significant break. If the town is taking the whole bit, we might. So we'll see.
So as Lisa and I frequently say, to be continued.
To be continued. Yep.
Absolutely. The spirit of recognizing that we've been working with policies that were established years ago when we were the ugly duckling. And now Brookhaven has become the swan on Long Island, and there's much more.
You guys were not the ugly duckling. You were just out in the hinterlands. That's all.
Okay. The remote duckling?
The remote duckling.
The duckling out in the
heading out by your lonesomes out there.
Did anyone have any other questions or things that they wanted to bring up about the UTEP?
Trust the attorneys.
Okay, so we just have 2 other items on the agenda. I think they're going to be pretty quick. I know you guys know last year we ramped up and got together a ton of resolutions and got us up to speed, since we went from having a few part-time employees to everyone. I'm sorry, we went from having a few part-time employees to a big change last year that we had all full-time employees. So I know I mentioned to everyone that I've been working with a HR company to do some things to further professionalize us. One of the things that I am bringing to you guys to see if this is something that you would like me to pursue, and if it is, then I can work with our HR company and do some research and see what some other companies do too. I've been talking to Fred about this, is a tuition reimbursement program. So just basically, if one of the staff people wants to take some classes that are pre-approved by us and dovetail with their roles and responsibilities, that the IDA would consider reimbursing them for the cost of the course. And there's all different ways to do it. It can be on a sliding scale. It can be, as per grade. It can also be, dependent on your longevity. So you get this degree and then, you get these credits, and then the next day you separate your employment, then you would have to pay it back. You wouldn't get the reimbursement. Things like that is sort of what I'm thinking about, but I want to know if the board is supportive of this concept in general. If you're not supportive of it, then I'm not going to continue to pursue it, but I do think it's a nice perk that we can offer to our staff to help them grow, which in turn helps the agency.
Yeah, just one caveat to that. Under the federal tax law, it can't be the employee saying, gee, I'd like to take this class, it would help me. Because then the reimbursement would be taxable income to the employee. It actually, you have to frame it the other way around, where you would say that, so you'd have a direction from the agency to the employee. We feel that as condition of your employment, you should take this course because this can help you serve the agency better. So it's got to be, I mean, it's the same issue, it's just how you phrase it. If the employer is saying, we want you to take this course, we'll pay for it, it's tax exempt to the employee. If the employee says, gee, I'd like to take this because it makes me better, then it's taxable. So we just got to be careful how you would actually paper it.
Okay.
And there's no issue about tying, let's say, a potential liability of the employee of whatever the cost of that credit or credits have been to continued employment. In other words, could they burn off the liability over a period of time?
I don't know the answer to that, Fred. It's been a long. I actually did research on this years ago when I was a young associate, but it's been a while, but typically it's the employer saying to the employee, and it came up in the context of, actually a university MBA program where employers were sending the person there to get an MBA, and it had to be that the employer was the one who said to the employee, we want you to get an MBA. I don't know the issue of like you get your MBA and you quit the next day, whether that would be taxable or not.
We're going to check that with our HR consultant anyway.
Yeah, it's really more of a tax issue than an HR consultant issue,
Right.
but still, and they may have seen that.
Lisa, does the town have a program like this?
Yes.
How do
Many
they,
people have taken advantage of it when you were part of the town.
In our office,
Yes.
one did, she's no longer an employee. She separated, she retired probably 8 years ago, 10 years ago, but she did take advantage of it through the town.
So there's no burning desire going on among the staff right now, or is there?
I think that there might be some opportunities. I don't have like an exact, but I think that there's people who have been thinking about, taking some courses, but I think that it's the type of thing that sure, it would certainly help their roles and responsibilities here. And I think it would benefit them, but maybe they're just not in the place right now to do it.
Okay. I mean, my two comments, Butch, I jumped in there. You finished,
Okay.
and I'll talk. I'm sorry.
oh, that's all right. Finish your thought, Frank.
No, I mean, two things, we just took on a whole bunch of employment issues and everything goes along with it. In light of what's happened with the town and whatnot, which I think is working out well for us. But, if there's no burning desire right now going on, my feeling is stabilize the ship, make sure everything's going well. We have the funds to support what we're doing and now and throughout the rest of the year and whatnot. I don't know.
If we don't offer this, nobody's going to take advantage of it. It's a chicken and egg situation. And
Well, no, I get it. I just, I always worry about money, I'm
part of your
not.
job.
Yeah, exactly. So, we just took on a major chunk is what I'm saying. Maybe we ought to stabilize the ship for a little while and relook at it in a period. How long has the new employment situation been in effect?
Since January 1.
This
So we're
year.
coming up on a, huh? Yeah, we're
Yeah,
coming up on a
January.
year.
Yeah, and the agency's had a good year and there are sufficient revenues. The Lord can talk to you, but your balance sheet is strong.
Yeah, Frank, I agree. And I think, whether somebody's raised their hand for a course now, or we've suggested rather, that they take a course. I mean, if we're in a position where we had to replace somebody, or at least I had to hire somebody, at least she doesn't have to say, we'll discuss it down the road. It's an easy,
Yeah.
I think it's an easy policy to put in place. And as Bill said, we've had a great year. I think the ship is pretty well stabilized, short of just buttoning up a couple HR things between now and the end of the year.
Okay.
So let's look into it, Lisa, with and Fred with the HR consultant. What would it look like? How much would it be likely to cost us? Of
And
course,
it-
I am always happy to plug the public university system, which offers significantly lower tuition in the private sector. No quality judgments intended there.
All
So
courses should be at Stony Brook. Is that what you're saying? I support that. You
not a
know?
requirement. That's right, Frank. We both
Well,
have
I mean, you think about it right now, that there's only two colleges left in the town. It's St. Joseph's College and SUNY Stony Brook, so.
But online gives you a whole world.
whole world.
Oh,
of-
online.
Yeah, take a look at it, see what it would look like. Come back to us in a couple of months. We could still put something in place in time for the new academic year next September.
Lisa, also, when you do that, could you look at what the town has, how the town operates their program and prepare like an analysis for us so that we can see how close we are to what the town, how close we are replicating what the town is doing?
Sure, the town offers, I know it actually. You have to get pre-approved. It has to be, which I think we should follow along. It has to be pre-approved. It has to relate to your jobs, your roles and responsibilities. So although I would love for you guys to pay for me to take a stained glass making class, I don't think it's gonna fly.
Never know. though.
Lisa's been in-
sorry.
Just never know, Lisa.
Never know.
Yeah,
Maybe
I'm
we're
sorry
trying to
to
encourage
interrupt
that industry in the town and.
And Lisa, we have a glass manufacturer. Actually, it might fit.
Okay,
no.
but
And I have to
Okay,
drop off
wait.
at this point. I'm sorry. I scheduled a 1 o'clock Zoom.
that's
Uh,
okay.
So
We're-
I don't think
You're
I'm.
late. You're
we're-
late, Anne Marie.
That's right. I'm already
Yeah,
late.
and I
Screwed.
apologize. I'm a half hour late for a meeting too, so I gotta.
Oh, don't worry, guys. We're very close to being done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. See you
Just-
later, Anne Marie.
So
Thank
long,
you.
Anne Marie.
Good.
So Felix,
luck.
just to answer your question, it has to be pre-approved. It has to be aligned with your roles and responsibilities. And then there's a sliding scale. I think for the town, if you get an A, they give you 75% of the tuition back. I'd have to double check that. B is 50 and a C is 25%. If you get a D or you fail, you're responsible for paying for it. But I just have to check those percentages, but that's basically the concept. We were thinking about taking it a little bit further in that you have to remain employed. But like Fred said, we need to see if that's even allowable.
Correct.
Okay.
You don't want to take the class and then 2 months later go somewhere else and all done.
Right,
Right.
or you graduate, you get this degree, you have this certification, you have these skills, and you go, thanks so much, I'm out.
Yeah.
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 So, I think so far for the first 3 items on the agenda, the consensus is come back with more information. So I'll
That sounds right.
follow up with this one too. And then the last item on the agenda, well, 2 things I just want to say. Prevailing wage, it's coming. That's basically all I have. I don't have any answers. There's a lot of questions, but it appears to be coming. There's some discussion that it might get postponed, but that's all hearsay and rumor. As it stands right now, we are operating as if it is in fact going to happen January 1st. And Nixon Peabody is working on edits to our application because there's things that we're going to have to add to our application. And they're already incorporating into closing documents, certifications that people acknowledge that they will follow prevailing wage if they have to, if it applies to them.
Two
So
comments from me. I talked to somebody last week who's very close to the governor, who supports a postponement of this by at least 6 months, perhaps a year. The problem, with a couple of problems. One, the board has not been established yet. And the board is the one that has to define a number of items within the prevailing wage legislation, not the least of which is what comes out of the category of costs. Because as I understand it, if we have a project that's in excess of $5 million, and the sum total throughout the pilot life is greater than 30% of quote unquote costs, then you've got to adopt prevailing wage. A couple of the other issues, everybody thought initially that as long as you closed the deal with the IDA before January 1st, you were grandfathered in. Well, I think the opinion now, and I'll let Barry comment on this, is that not only do you have to close with the IDA before January 1st, if that date holds, you also have to have signed contracts with some of your vendors to make it work, to stay out of the prevailing wage legislation and costs. Does that sound about right, Barry?
That is correct.
So more,
I'm sorry, Fred.
I
Go
think
ahead.
Bill may have dropped off.
yeah, he did.
Oh, he did, okay.
Yep, yep.
Well, then I guess this would be for either the other two attorneys that are left. If the prevailing wage is an obligation of the developer, how does that affect us giving them the benefits? If we gave benefits to a developer, for example, who's building, I don't know, we'll go back to the warehouse, he's building a warehouse. And we incentivize that builder, but the builders through the course of the development stops paying prevailing wage. How does that affect us?
I think, is it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Barry, but prevailing wage on the town level, we have to get certified payrolls. So although they don't have this committee and this, everything set up for this law, I would have to think that they're gonna put some onus on our entities to sort of make sure that these people are getting paid prevailing wage.
Yep.
So when there's a project in town that requires prevailing wage, for instance, if it's on town property, we must get certified payrolls and that show the prevailing wage being paid.
But that was, my question was, what happens if we get that certified payroll at the beginning of the process and they're paying a prevailing wage and they're paying it, they got a 10-year abatement, they pay it for the first 3 years, and then they stop paying it and pay whatever wage that they want to pay. What is our obligation and our responsibility at that point?
I would think we're gonna have an ongoing obligation to see that the prevailing wage is being paid, but we don't know yet. I don't think there's enough on this but it wouldn't make sense otherwise. If no one's watching the store, then why pass a law?
But
So
why
with
is
the
it us?
town, for the life of that contract, let's say it's our garbage carters, okay? We certify pay, that's a 10-year deal. We certify the payroll. We have to get those certified payrolls all the time. It doesn't stop after 1 year.
Okay, I know that we're not going to stop getting them. What I'm asking is what happens?
Terminate.
If I may,
What our action would be, you have to terminate them because they're not
And
complying with the
recapture.
law. It's going to be right in our agreements that they have to comply with the law. So it becomes a,
So then we would have to embark upon a clawback of all of the benefits we gave them?
I think you'd have
at least for when
flexibility
they
to
stop
choose.
paying prevailing wage.
Yeah.
Alex, the other couple other things too is when we talk about benefits, it's not just the benefits from the IDA. It's any grants they may have gotten from the state. And there's a whole host of other things under that definition when it's defined.
Mhm.
Plus, if it is prevailing wage, all of their subcontractors have to adopt prevailing wage as well.
So to Fred's point, why is it us? Why wouldn't it be New York State? If New York State gives a grant, why are we the ones that are certifying payrolls? I don't think it's been well defined, and I'm not raising my hand to certify payrolls. We
I
can-
feel like there'll be, there have all been
You know,
all kinds of
Lisa, I don't
workarounds
see
and suggestions.
how you don't, though.
I
If
agree.
we're-
and
If
that-
we're saying they have to comply, we can't just put that language in an agreement
No, but my
and
point
look
is,
the other way.
if New York State's giving them a grant, are we certifying and New York State's certifying?
No, I'm talking about if you give them IDA benefits.
Right, but if a lot of our projects are getting benefits from multiple entities.
Yeah, listen, if one of these
Yes.
blows up, I'm just telling you from a
Yes, it's
standpoint
gonna
of,
be our point, our
it's
fault.
gonna be on you, whether
Mhm.
you looking or not.
We're,
Well,
There's
this
a
is
lot of
a
unknown.
rapid Development in our town and all the towns.
We're all guessing,
yeah,
but there has to be an enforcement arm, otherwise why pass a law?
Imagine if it was this year, would a PPP be considered a benefit if
Yes.
it were forgiven?
it's a loan. The loans are listed in there and you pay back a loan.
Well, I don't think a loan would be included.
Yeah, but that was federal money too. I don't
Well,
know,
I know.
Fred,
not state money.
public subsidies, including grants, tax incentives, loans.
Loan is an obligation. If you pay it back, where's the benefit?
You gotta get into the detail.
Yeah,
Mhm,
too many weeds.
Yep.
yeah. So
So
it's, yeah.
again, to be continued when we find out more.
but we
It's
just
gonna
wanted to
put
make
some-
sure you guys know. Barry, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, the law has a lot of information about sort of keeping payroll for 6 years and providing it to the comptroller of the state. It doesn't go into who's responsible for certifying, to Annette's point, but because it's vague, I think there might have to be some regulations and or guidance provided as to whose responsibility is to have ongoing monitoring.
Hopefully Paris doesn't get involved in this.
It's going to,
Yeah,
if they can figure out how to
One
add
of
to
our
it.
requirements, it probably is.
I'm sure the ABO will say that this is your responsibility regardless of what the Public Subsidy Board says.
So true.
So.
Guys, I gotta go.
Thank
See
you,
ya.
Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Love you
You
all.
want it
Um,
to, you
does
want it to
anybody
be the responsibility. You don't
feel-
want that to blow up after we give, and it comes out, and then you can have the unions all on us and everything else. No,
I agree. It's a mess.
yep.
So before we go, I just want to remind everyone that your board assessments are due. So if you can take a minute, if you need, I can have them sent out again. I'm seeing nods. Okay, yes, we'll send
Yes,
them
Josh.
around again.
I thought I filled mine out already.
Other than that,
Did we sign those board assessments? Because I don't remember if I sent mine in or not.
we haven't received yours.
about
Okay,
mine?
well, I guess I haven't sent
No.
it in.
You sure? Oh, you're killing me.
Doesn't mean you didn't send it in. It just means we haven't received it.
Josh, have you gotten anybody,
Mail is slow.
including mine?
And Anne Marie is the only one who sent hers in so far.
Okay.
Don't forget, we need one for the LDC and the IDA.
So you'll send us those.
Yes, we'll send it out again. Howard, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Try not to talk.
Okay, good. Keep that up, Howard. Try to keep the cough to a minimum. If nobody has anything else, I think that's all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
all.
Do we need a motion to close the meeting?
We probably do, because we opened it.
So moved.
I will second it.
Third it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, cool. See everybody on Tuesday at 3:30.
Take care, everybody. See you Tuesday.
Aye.
All right,
Thank
bye-bye.
you.
Barry, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you.